Shiny Pokemon are rare Pokemon encountered with an alternative color scheme to the regular base variant. Every single Pokemon in the game has a shiny variant. While some are rarer than others, usually the legendary and mythical Pokemon, you currently have a 1 out of 4,096 chance to encounter one. But today we aren't here to talk about shinies in regards to what they are and how rare they are to encounter. No, instead, I want to focus on another aspect of these alternative colored Pokemon. That's right, today we will be talking about the art of the shiny Pokemon and why I believe objectively there are no bad shiny Pokemon. And the key word is subjectively, because subjectively speaking, I personally do have my own list of good and quote unquote bad shiny Pokemon. Now, this idea of bad shinies existing is something I used to believe a few years ago. I mean, just look at the shiny variants of Armarouge and Cerulean. They just have their eye color swapped. But as I started to ponder on why some Pokemon have quote unquote bad shinies, I asked the question, how are Pokemon made in the first place? So I did some research and here's what I found from Master Game Freak himself. In an interview with Game Informer, he says, one thing we always really pay attention to is treating them like they're living creatures, so you have to try and imagine where they would live in the environment and why it looks like the way it does, what it would eat. When designing Pokemon, and not just from a graphical design perspective, there must be a reason for why it looks the way it does, and you have to think about why it might live in the Pokemon world. Pokemon designs rarely get canceled, so to speak. If a new Pokemon weren't going to fit in the game or world, Game Freak doesn't let them go far past the conceptual stages. Once you're in the middle of creating it and someone goes, no, that's not a Pokemon, and the design process gets killed, that doesn't really happen that much. End quote. The key takeaway from Mr. Masada's statement back in 2017 is that the Pokemon must fit into the world itself. I think that this especially applies to Pokemon that people deemed as out there on release, such as Klefki and Klink. I remember those Pokemon receiving a lot of criticism back in the day, but as time went on, the community accepted these Pokemon, and nowadays I even see some people praising these Pokemon. And why is that? Well, it's because eventually they found their place in the Pokemon world, even though at the time they were unconventional designs. All of this is to say mainly that the Pokemon's the center of what will determine what the shiny will look like. Okay, so now you have your Pokemon's design planned out, so what's next? Well, that's simple, it's coloring. This is probably the easiest and also the hardest part in designing a color scheme for a Pokemon's base and shiny. You see, finding the objectively correct color scheme isn't the easiest of tasks, and that's not even a stretch to say because colors themselves each have a different feeling they can convey. But luckily for Pokemon, that format is already kind of laid out. See, while colors can often be associated with feelings, their use in Pokemon design seem to be more for theming and to represent their type. The water type is the most saturated, having 146 Pokemon, and a lot of them are completely blue or use the color in some way, as we associate blue with the ocean or water in general. You can see this in all of the types, with all 18 types having a color representing their theming. But now that we know that these two core game design concepts are the key to determining what a Pokemon will look like, how does that correlate with the art of the shiny Pokemon? Well, it's simple really. The base design follows both core principles. While the shiny designs may follow these concepts, but overall Game Freak will sometimes prioritize the first core concept over the second, that being, will this Pokemon fit into the world? An example of them using both concepts perfectly is Shiny Greninja. Not only does it fit into the world of Pokemon, but it also uses the black coloring scheme to highlight the dark typing. Another example of this is Shiny Celebi being pink, representing the psychic typing. While an example of Game Freak favoring the core fitting this world principle is Shiny Gyarados. Red is the perfect color to convey the power and rage of a Gyarados, even though that the second principle deems red to be a color more associated with fire typing. But overall, the red Gyarados feels like something you'd see in the Pokemon world. To drive this point further, I asked my girlfriend to draw us up a random Pokemon to color blindly to compare it to its base and its shiny. As you can see, our designs far differ from the original. Even so, both of us stuck with the second concept of associating the color with the typing of the Pokemon. Compared to the original and in-game Shiny though, you can see how much different they appear. A particular criticism that the community has of actual Shiny Flaffy is that it does not look that much different than the regular version, and subjectively speaking, I do agree that it looks too much the same. But as I said, Game Freak objectively just wants the Pokemon to seem like it would be a creature that you could just walk out and randomly find in the world. Flaffy in its original Shiny ticks those boxes well. My interpretation of the Shiny arguably does not. The color scheme is a bit jarring for the design, and it doesn't seem like something you would find out in the world. The same sort of criticism can be said about my girlfriend's design too, as the black on Flaffy makes it appear that it could be a ghost or a dark type. So from this perspective, you can see why Flaffy in particular has a plainer Shiny. It's just the objectively better design, even though personally I think the Dark Flaffy is just kind of badass. So yeah, when it comes to the art of the Shiny Pokemon, it's best to look at it through the lens of the two concepts of Pokemon designs. The most important being, will it fit in this world? So next time you're looking at a plain Shiny, I hope you look at it from that perspective. And maybe, just maybe, we can forgive Game Freak for not color palette swapping Armarouge and Ceruledge.